With us today, we have the Athletics Crystal Palace writer, Matt Woosnam, and also Dom Fifield, who's also with us as well. Dom, let's start with you on this. We did a podcast when Palace appointed Glasner back in February, and I asked you whether Palace face a real threat for relegation at that period. Looking at where Palace are at now, 12th in the league, and the way they've got here under Glasner, it's fair to say, he's had quite a good tenure so far.
Oh, it's been brilliant. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. And it, with the benefit of hindsight and having seen how it's gone, we still have to acknowledge that there was an element of risk in him coming at this stage of the season, bearing in mind that the team that he inherited lacked confidence, belief, lacked their best players because they're all injured. And the club did feel as if it was on the floor a bit. It's not the ideal situation to come in and manage in the Premier League for the first time. At that stage in the season, even the transfer window had closed, so it wasn't an option to change things around. But he has made brilliant use of the time that he's had at his disposal. Chiefly that little break they had, a 3-week period around international fixtures and Palace not being in the FA Cup, and it took them to Marbella for that period. The 2 weeks subsequently, he's just worked with the players. He's got them fitter. He's got his ideas across very, very quickly. And yeah, it hasn't. Don't get me wrong. It hasn't been plain sailing. Immediately after that little break, they drew at Nottingham Forest and lost at Bournemouth. Ideal 1 point from those two games. But the run that they're on at the moment, it's just that everything has clicked, and it's helped him that his best players are back and in the team again, and Palace just look transformed.
Yeah, I mean, the form at the moment, Matt, 5 wins in their last 6 games, all those sides that they've beaten are above them. The Man United one, that 4-0 thrashing of Manchester United, I'm sure Palace fans will dine out on that one for a while. But I guess from an outside perspective, it's the style of football, though, that's really exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a complete contrast to the Roy Hodgson era. They're playing much higher up the pitch. They're pressing more intensely. They're running more. The wing-back system, at first you wondered whether the system that Glasner was going to play was going to work. And what's interesting is that he doesn't really see it as a formation. It's more about principles of play. And one of the things he did when he first came in was talk to the players about principles of play rather than about formation. But the football's so much more enjoyable. It's so much more entertaining. Of course, that is helped by having Olise and Eze in particular available. There's no question about that. But you can see the change in the way that they're playing, and it is against teams above them in the table with better resources, in theory, better players. And it's just been a complete change, and it's been so good to watch, and it's so much better to watch. I can't even explain how much.
Look at that, Matt's smiling about Crystal Palace. This is wonderful.
But one thing I'm interested in is, Patrick Vieira was supposed to take, Palace into this sort of new dimension, really, and I think he was also very astute in what he wanted to do with the team. What do we see that's different from how he approached these players to how Glasner's approached these players as well?
I think one of the things is that Glasner has a backroom staff who are all really well appreciated at the club by the players, by everyone. Under Vieira, that wasn't really the case. That his backroom staff weren't particularly rated. There were sort of concerns about them. That obviously not the only thing, but that is a factor in it. And he has got quite a significant backroom staff. He's got several assistants. There's sort of defined roles for them as well. And they're working them harder than ever. I mean, even under Vieira, Vieira was sort of a hard taskmaster. The thing with Vieira is that he wanted everyone to be at his level when he was a player. Obviously World Cup winner, invincible with Arsenal, and those players weren't ever going to be the same as that. Whereas under Glasner, it's actually about getting them to buy into things. So he referenced the intrinsic motivation. So if you don't believe that what you're doing is best for you and therefore better for everyone, you have to believe that there's a reason for doing it. You're not just doing it for the sake of it. There has to be a reason for it. And you have to believe that and feel it. He talks about sort of feeling the emotion. And I think that's quite crucial. His coaching staff and himself have been able to implement that in the players. And it's not just in Olise and Eze coming back, the squad players, if you like, the players who maybe wouldn't otherwise have been that important to the team have come in and been brilliant. Will Hughes has been absolutely outstanding when a lot of Palace fans were saying that they would rather see the back of him. He's triggered a contract extension and they're happy about that. Nathaniel Klein coming in as a makeshift centre back when he's never played in that position before, making goal-saving blocks against Liverpool at Anfield in the 1-0 win. So a lot of it is about the coaching, I think. And there was a difference between Hodgson, who had a much lighter touch. Vieira had a very, as I say, hard taskmaster approach, whereas Glasner is kind of has the players' respect and he is hard with them where necessary, but the demands are less than they were with Vieira. It's kind of a middle ground. And I think all of those things have been a massive part in the success of recent weeks.
Yeah, Dom, Matt's done this beautiful piece on Glasner, and this is a little glimpse on the sort of ambition he has. You know, he says for Glasner, ambition is a two-way transaction. Glasner then goes on to say, if let's say a player is too good for Palace, the possibility that he changes club is high, and the same is the other way. If the quality of Palace is too high for a player, he said, the higher the level of Crystal Palace, the higher the level of player we can keep in our squad. You look at a player like Mateta, who, and I can't remember how he was last season, but it wasn't that great. Look at the level he's got him to at this point. That must be good for the ambition of what you want to see a manager do for a team like Palace.
Yeah, again, I think Jean-Philippe Mateta was improving under Roy Hodgson with game time. Game time has been the key to him, and look, he has stepped up hugely. He's won the Player of the Year. Well, no one would have seen that coming. I think this is a player that Palace would quite happily have sold in various transfer windows over the last 18 months. But he's definitely flourished under Glasner with the faith that's been shown in him, and with this combination of this front three that he's got. Eberechi, Eze and Michael Olise playing around him, and they're all benefiting each other, and that ties in the step up certainly in his development and his progression in the last month or so ties in with what Matt says about the squad players, because we can all sit here and say, yeah, Michael Olise is a world beater because he is. He's going to go to the very top in the game. We can probably say that. Coming very close to that with Eze as well, he's got the natural talent to impress on bigger stages than Crystal Palace will probably offer him ultimately. But with Will Hughes and with Nat Klein and even with Joel Ward playing as a right-sided centre half, or these guys, for them to be stepping up, for Jefferson Lerma to be thriving as a left-sided centre half, a midfielder by trade, he doesn't play that. I mean, even with Tyrek Mitchell's progression on the left, the way that Daniel Munoz, who arrives in January for a pittance from Belgian football and has looked a phenomenal player up and down that right flank, and they've all adapted brilliantly. They've all fitted into the system. They've all bought into what Matt's described as Glasner's ideas, his philosophy, and they all look supremely comfortable at the moment in the way things are going. Yeah, and it still needs, because this is Palace we're talking about. They're not world beaters in the terms of the Premier League. It still needs your best players on the pitch. It's no surprise that out of this run of games, the 6 matches where Palace have been unbeaten, the one game they didn't win was the one game that Eze didn't play in. So I think take one of those two out of the team, you're still going to struggle necessarily to beat other Premier League sides, but throw it all together. And I mean, I've never gone into. I said this last night, and I've never gone into a game thinking Palace are going to win in the Premier League with more confidence than I did in the Manchester United game. So we're gonna beat them. They're gonna wipe the floor with this United team at the moment. And strangely, I have the same feeling about Aston Villa on Sunday. I mean, particularly now that Aston Villa's season is done. But even before, I just thought Villa had to get their Champions League qualification sorted before they went to Selhurst Park, because if Palace click like they have been of late, they will not be. Villa will really struggle to hold them.
I think the other thing with Mateta is as well that Palace are winning the ball much higher up the pitch. And I don't have to. Glasner spoke about this and spoke about how Mateta now is kind of getting the ball in more dangerous areas. He doesn't have to keep coming back without as much support. Again, that helps having Eze and Olise there, but not just that. But he doesn't have to keep coming back and holding the ball up and playing it off and then coming back. And he's in better positions because of the way that they're playing, because of the pressure from the wing backs coming forward, with Daniel Munoz, who Dom rightly mentioned, has been absolutely brilliant, especially in attack. And I think the other thing that has helped with Glasner is that the system covers the players' weaknesses. So Daniel Munoz is not the best defender in the world. He gets caught out on transition, but having someone next to him means that he can then run up and down the flank with much more protection than before. But yeah, with Mateta, like he's much closer to the penalty area, which is obviously he's improved a lot with his hold up play, but his skill is just in finishing, as he says. And I think, since I interviewed him as well, he's been absolutely on fire. So, I'm going to have to take credit for that. When he said in my interview that he could be one of the Premier League's the best goal scorers or something like that in the Premier League, I think everyone genuinely was quite gobsmacked by that claim. But, fair play to him. He's gone on and completely, I think his shot conversion rate, I think, is the best in the Premier League so far this season, or something ridiculous.
It's all on
like
you.
That.
It's all on you, Matt, right? It's all on you. This is how we see it. All right, take it. Just take it. But I hate to be the voice of pragmatism here, gents, but, there was a time when we were looking at Tottenham and Postecoglou. Oh, look at this. On the front foot. What kind of football are they playing? Sean Dyche takes over, at Arsenal. At Everton, and they beat Arsenal 1-0. The Dyche effect, how Sean Dyche has transformed Everton. How much do we need to be cautious about sort of new manager bounce? Because, a whole season next season in the Premier League, it's going to be absolutely relentless, and the games are going to be coming thick and fast. Teams are going to get new personnel in. Man United are going to hopefully learn from their mistakes this season. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a different conversation next season, Dom.
Well, it will, because people will know what Glasner's attempting to do and how his team plays. I wouldn't describe this as new manager bounce, though. And Palace won one of his first 6 games in charge. It's actually been more of an evolution in a relatively short period of time, a speedy evolution, if you like. But yeah, next season will bring its own challenges. I think it's also interesting that the way he plays requires his players to be super fit. They have to run a lot more than a lot of these players have been used to under previous Palace managers. Next season is a full season where they've got to do that. And it's okay to do it in a 12, 13 game burst at the end of a season, potentially, but they're going to have to sustain it next year if they're going to make this work, which is going to require more bodies in the squad who are able to come in and fill in when players inevitably are knackered or come up with the hamstring injuries, etc. That's the way it is. And we have seen this with previous Red Bull disciples, haven't we, in the Premier League, where particularly at clubs at Palace's size, where they do get off to good starts and we all get very carried away and think this is brilliant, and then it sort of plateaus out. But the thing about Glasner is this is a man that's got virtually almost 200 Bundesliga games under his belt. He's had big success there. Wolfsburg into the Champions League, Eintracht Frankfurt to a European trophy. We're talking about a manager with proper pedigree. And I look at it and think, well, he's got his own ambitions, obviously. I mean, he will want to kick on and be back in the Champions League at some point in the future, whether that's with Palace or more likely with someone else. So Palace have got to make sure that he's happy going into next season, and he will then hopefully show everybody what he can do over a sustained period of time. But it's been a wonderful start.
Bayern proposing a £15.5 million compensation package to Palace for Glasner, but Palace have stood firm, valuing him more at what, £86 million. That's a lot of money, by the way, for a manager. But that's a pretty hands-off statement to say, we've got our man, we want to stick by him. He's only just started the job.
Yeah, I think we need to caveat a bit of this. But Bayern, as Seb has made out, are frantically scrabbling around for a replacement for Thomas Tuchel at the moment. And given Glasner's reputation in the Bundesliga, and the start that he's made at Palace, it was natural probably that they would look at him. We should stress also that Crystal Palace insists that there was never any formal contact between Bayern Munich and Crystal Palace. We know how these things work, generally speaking. It's often intermediaries that are making these inquiries and you're sounding people out, etc. And I imagine if that €100 million, £86 million, whatever it was, figure ever cropped up, that it was more of a polite way of ushering Bayern's negotiations out of the window, etc. Rather than a sort of this is what we value Glasner at. But just listen to what we're saying here. Bayern Munich wanted Crystal Palace's manager, and he is staying at Crystal Palace. I think that's testament to what Palace have become, the impact that Glasner's made there. I suppose the power and draw of the Premier League. Possibly it doesn't reflect too well on Bayern Munich and the circus at that club at the moment, but it's quite the story, and it's quite a show of strength from Palace.
Back to that, Matt. Some might see this as a stepping stone. This is a very ambitious manager. I mean, you've spoken to him. You get it, right? That comes out of your piece, but this won't be the last time, if he does a good job at Palace, that you might be fending off some bigger clubs, because as we said in a few podcasts now, there's a dearth of decent managers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing to think about it is Palace are a club that actually are selling the idea to players, for example, that they can come to Palace, they can get better, they can be improved, and they can go on to better and bigger things. Palace aren't going to be the end destination for these players. And it's the same with Glasner. Like, any manager who comes to Palace and does well inevitably is going to attract attention from elsewhere, from bigger clubs. And at some point, if Glasner does continue along this incredibly amazing vein of form, then there is going to be more attention on him, and there are going to be clubs who are looking at him and thinking he could really improve us. And I'm sure he is clearly very ambitious, and that extends to his players. He wants the best for his players as well as himself and the team. It's clear that he would. He actually, I just say it again. It's clear that he wants to improve himself as well. There's a lot of self-development there. And I find that really interesting. I think it's really important for a manager to want to better themselves. And I think that is also going to be attractive for other clubs. But Palace will obviously want to hold on for him as long as they can whilst he's doing well. We know how quickly things can change. We saw it with Patrick Vieira. Admittedly, this is not the same as that, but there was a period where we were talking about potentially even Arsenal were linked with potentially at some point going for Patrick Vieira. But Palace will be hopeful, I think, of keeping him at the club. There's no suggestion that he's unhappy there. I think hopefully he can see that they're going to build something there. And that is obviously a massive contrast to how it was in January and February when he was appointed. So there's a lot going for him to stay at Palace at this point. And next season could be a really good season. I mean, it's Palace, so whether or not it will be is another matter. But and I don't want to get carried away. Like, a lot of Palace fans are getting very carried away, and I get it. I completely get it. But I just hold back a little bit.
Well, we have mentioned a few times that this is a very ambitious manager, and perhaps there was a conversation at Frankfurt around not potentially having the kind of money he would have liked to maybe bolster that squad to build on their Europa League success. I mean, look, the riches of the Premier League versus the Bundesliga are very, very different, but he will need to be backed in the transfer market, Matt, won't he?
Yeah, I mean, Palace clearly need to strengthen their squad. It's not a squad that needs major remedial work done to it. We've seen what Glasner's managed to get out of those players who are sort of squad players, but there's definitely a big summer coming up for Palace. Dougie Friedman, the sporting director, his future at the moment is unresolved. We don't know what's going to happen with him. Newcastle United are interested in him, and that could make a big impact on Palace's summer transfer plans. Obviously, Michael Olise has a lot of interest. Eberechi Eze has a lot of interest. Both of those players have release clauses, and Mark Gay as well. It's possible that one, two, or even I wouldn't have thought all of them would go this summer. I think that's almost certainly not going to happen. But at least one of them, there's a chance that they will lose one of those players, and they need to not only replace them adequately, but then bolster that squad. Because as Dom said, doing it for 12 games or 13 games as it will be is different to doing it for a whole season. And we've seen this year how much injuries and unavailability have weighed heavy on Palace. Czech Decore being out since October, even though Adam Wharton has come in and been absolutely outstanding, and his name should be in the conversation for the Euros, even if he doesn't go. Like, it should be something that people are thinking about. It's clear that Palace do need to improve the squad depth, and if they do sell Mark Gay or Eze or Olise, then they will have some money to do that, and they just have to make sure that they continue with the impressive recruitment that we've seen, and that will show Glasner, I think, as well, that the club is moving in the right direction, and they're not going to make the same mistakes that they have in the past, where again, under Vieira, the squad wasn't strengthened. Under Hodgson, the squad wasn't strengthened sufficiently. So previous managers have been hamstrung by that. Palace had a lot of hamstring injuries this season. So yeah, I think just showing Glasner that the club is ambitious and matches his own ambition is really important this summer.
Dom, I just want to throw a hypothetical at you because it might still not happen. But, and by the way, I'm cautious because there are a lot of Crystal Palace players that have stepped up recently, but I guess the two that really stand out are Olise and Eze. If Palace do have to lose one of those players in the summer, which would you think would hurt the team the most if they left?
Oh, wow, what a question that is. That's a really difficult question to answer because their strength is often in their combination. It's the way that they work together. I mean, on and off the pitch, they're best mates off the pitch. They have this sort of understanding on the pitch, almost telepathy between them. They know which runs each other is going to be making. They sense. I mean, the 1-2s that they play sometimes are just magical. I think isn't it right, Matt, that Olise's contributed 33% of Eze's Premier League goal total? I think 8 out of 24.
I think 18 goal contributions between the two of them in the last few games or whatever. It's been incredible.
I mean, I suppose if you're looking at it from a business point of view,
it's a tough one, I know, because they're so good together. That's why I asked that question.
I mean, Olise has been unbelievable. His numbers are unbelievable this season when he's been fit. But the problem is that Michael Olise is coming up to the end of his third season at Crystal Palace, and he's never had a pre-season at Crystal Palace still. The injuries have eaten into each one of those campaigns. So I suppose you're weighing up, on the one hand, he's untouchable when he's on the pitch, but you don't get him on the pitch, for the entirety of a season. Eze also had his injury problems, and I mean, the Achilles was freakish. You could argue the hamstring injury is more of a problem if you're sort of looking at sort of longevity, I guess. You've really done it. Can we not sell So I don't want to sell any of them.
Do you know what it is,
I'm
Dom?
still getting
That's
over
exactly
Ian Wright leaving all those years ago. Why do we
that's
have
the
to sell
business
them now?
chat. That's the business chat, isn't it? Because that these two players are worth a considerable amount of money, and we can see the potential. We can see where they could go. Or maybe, Matt, the question is, they stay at Palace for another season, earn their stripes, and then they go again, once Glasner's done. I mean, what would you say to that? Because Dom's clearly stumped.
I'm not stumped by that question at all. Michael Olise has to stay at Palace. Like, I cannot imagine Palace without Michael Olise anymore. I know, obviously, the injuries are a problem, and as Dom says, like, the combinations with Eze are incredible. But I think that as brilliant as Eze is, and this is not to take anything away from him, Olise just has that little bit extra that Eze doesn't have at the moment. And I think Olise will end up having the pick of clubs at some point, maybe not this summer, but if he stays at Palace and does stay fit and plays the way that he has been playing, then I think he'll have the pick of clubs next summer as to the big clubs where he will go. And I think he's just incredible to watch as well. More than anything, it's just the way that you can predict what he's going to do, but good luck stopping him. Against Wolves in the 3-1 win at the weekend, when he cut inside, as soon as he made that space on the edge of the box to cut inside, you knew it was a goal. You just knew it was going in, and no one can stop that. The goal against Luton in October in that unfortunate game where Decore got injured and Eze got injured. The way he ran down the line and cut inside and curled it into the top corner, he's just got something special that I genuinely don't think I have seen at Palace. Like, obviously Wilfried Zaha, absolutely amazing, but I think Olise is close to eclipsing him in terms of his impact. Impact's the wrong word, because Zaha did it all by himself for so long, but Olise is just absolutely incredible, and to lose him would be just awful. Like, after a season where it was so difficult to watch for every week, and the back end of last season as well, when it was everyone was so down, and having someone like Olise come in, he brings so much to the team, and he brings so much to the fans. Like,
I didn't think we'd spend this pod talking about those two players, but it just felt like the natural place. But as Dom's pointed out, though, his injury record isn't that great, and also when he has been injured, Eze's been the one dragging Palace through some really difficult times as well, and that's why the dilemma is so tricky. But also, you've got two players here, literally at that point in their career where you can completely see it, right? They're both incredibly talented. Let's just quash that there for now, because I feel like we could keep talking about this. But then, Dom, the question is, how does Glasner persuade these two, I guess, young, amazing players to stay at Palace for another season? Because you can see the potential of how this team works with this little combination, and also a wider combination of various other players as well.
Well, he persuades them by doing what he's doing, by winning games, and by giving this impression that Palace are generating momentum, that they're upwardly mobile, that they can go places, and that's all he can do. If he lost one or both of them, I actually look at Oliver Glasner and what he wants to do, and think that he would be able to find players out there who could fit in and not make the same impact, but strengthen the collective, perhaps. I think I don't have that concern about it, because I actually look at, say, Eze, for example, and I'm not convinced that he's necessarily the type of player that Oliver Glasner would necessarily have looked to have in his team at previous clubs. He's not the all-out sort of dynamic, physically imposing, end-to-end, box-to-box player that all energy basically and pace that you'd expect of a Glasner player in that role. But because he does it in his way, and he does it in his way brilliantly, with this sort of gliding technique, which it just makes him again untouchable at times. It has worked in this combination, and the fact that Olise and Mateta are occupying players as well has created space in which Eze can exploit. But if he loses him, or he loses Olise, I'm sure that there will be players that come in that would fit into, I don't want to say system because Matt will rebuke me for that after his earlier comment. It fit into the philosophy almost, isn't it? It's fit into the collective, and Palace will still pose a threat. So it's all very exciting. It should be exciting. There's a lot of, after a miserable period in that middle of the season where Palace was starved of those two players on the pitch. They just weren't there, and without them, Palace looked a struggling team. Chuck in Doucouré's absence as well, chuck in Marc Guéhi's absence. Suddenly there's a lot of joy around the place again. There's a lot of joy in watching this team play. They're incisive, they're creative, they're attack-minded. There's real vim and verve about the place. There's momentum behind the team. It's all very positive. It's all very optimistic. And long may that continue. I hope that carries into the summer, beyond the Villa game, into the summer. I hope it carries into the transfer market. I hope it carries into next season. And yeah, because you look at it and there's so much talent there. If they could keep the majority of them together, the vast majority of them together, that team can go to places. It really can. It can certainly go from 14th place.
What does ambition look like for Crystal Palace, right? What do Palace want? Because there was that kind of, do we want to be a mid-table team or whatnot, right? You now have a manager who's won the Europa League, a manager with incredible experience, a manager who's got a really solid foundation in terms of the philosophy he wants to instill, the relationship he wants to have with those players, and a backroom staff that are able to give him that as well. What does the ambition look like for Palace now? Is this a statement of intent?
Yeah, I think Palace's kind of, I guess, ambition eventually is to qualify for Europe. That's clearly something that they want to do. They've been in the Premier League for, I think the next season will be the 12th season in the Premier League, I think. So they're an established club in the Premier League. They've kind of they haven't really progressed beyond a certain point, which is understandable because there is that limit for clubs. But I think with the way that their transfer strategy changed in sort of 2021, with the signing of the players, like Olise, a little bit before that, Eze, Joachim Andersen as well. Like they're getting to a point where they're looking to move forward, and those players have progressed since then. So you can see the progression in the players, and now it's a case of just supplementing that. And I think next season, Steve Parish sort of at the end of last season on the pitch sort of said we're going to take this club to the next level, and he got a lot of derision for that because of the way that things went, and it's kind of taken a little bit out of context as well. But I think next season, who knows? I really don't know where it's going to go next season, but I would think that they would be targeting at least a top half finish if, off the back of what we've seen, and if they can keep these players at the club, then there is a lot of optimism around next season. I mean, the Premier League is such an unforgiving league, but I think there will be plenty of optimism that they can improve and maybe they could still get a best ever points total this season. I mean, before Glasner, even when Glasner had taken over, there was a conversation about will they even get to their lowest ever points total in the Premier League, which I think is 41 points since they got promoted. So there'll be several sort of measurements that you can use for progress, but I suppose the main ones are a top half finish would be absolutely brilliant, and I guess 50 points as well. Like they've never reached 50 points, so it's a bit of an arbitrary figure, but that would be an improvement as well. So I don't think Europe is realistic at this point. Like I think we'd have to see what happens in the summer, and I think that's just Palace fans kind of getting caught up in the emotion and the enthusiasm. But I do think that improvement on this season is possible.
Yeah, Dom, I don't want to compare them to arch rivals Brighton, but can we see a European journey under a guy who actually has experienced it, lifted a trophy with this club?
Well, there's not much point in saying no, because you have to have that. You have to have a level of ambition. Palace fans have endured a season where a lot of people have asked, what is the point of Crystal Palace? That has been, what's the expression, Matt? A meme? Or it's appeared on social media. I'm so old. It is. People have asked that question. Well, the point of Crystal Palace this season has ended up being, beating Manchester United home and away, and winning at Anfield, scoring 4 goals in 20 minutes against West Ham, playing Newcastle United off the park, and that was arguably their most impressive performance of the season to date. That's a point. That is a point. That is great fun to watch. But to do it all with a smile on their faces, to do it with the joy that we've seen from Eze and from Olise, from Mateta, to do it with Adam Wharton, a player that clearly other clubs must have seen in the Championship, but no one else took a risk on, and to see him flourishing in this midfield, that's a point. That is why they are there, and that is a sign of progression in itself. And yeah, they're always mired in mid-table. They never get higher than 10th. They've never been lower than 15th. At some point, they will kick on. If they keep this group together, they will be higher than 10th. And yeah, that's a raison d'etre. That's a reason for optimism.
Okay, let's leave it there. Dom, Matt, thanks so much for your time, and do not forget to rate and review the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're back tomorrow. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.